What's going on, people? Georgio Savvides here, founder of the Hip Hop Orchestra, as well as the host of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents podcast. And I got a really exciting announcement to finally make with everyone, is that we have our very first official sponsor for the podcast. Now, they are an amazing company called Eldon's Vault, who are extremely dedicated in bringing you the very best in officially licensed merchandise from pop culture. And when I mean the very best, I mean the very best. They provide things like keyrings, caps, t-shirts, to Funko Pops, to statues from all over, such as DC, Marvel, Disney, The Mandalorian, Harry Potter, music artists from all over the place, and they are ridiculously good. I've got a couple of things to show you on offer at the moment. This trust me, their stuff is amazing. So, t-shirts, like I mentioned, like the one I'm wearing right now. It's got Rocky right here, which I absolutely love. Or, like I said, also got Funko Pops as well, 3.75 inches and 10 inches. I've got a couple of 10 inches right here for you. I've got Post Malone right here, and I've also got Biggie right here, who I absolutely love. These are so sick. Eldon's Vault, trust me, they are amazing. Now, I'm going to leave the link below in the video right here, and also in the description below as well in all future videos from the podcast. But trust me, Eldon's Vault are amazing. Website is www.eldonsvault.co.uk. Get in touch with them now and start buying ASAP. But also, before I forget as well, I just want to say the biggest thank you to Eldon's Vault for sponsoring the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you. And trust me, get in touch with them right now. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And peace. What's going on, people? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents, joined by a wicked guest today, founder of HyperTribe and plugged into podcast, Kimmy Dickson. How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. How's things? You been okay?
Yeah, everything's been all right, just going through the pandemic.
Oh, tell me
Slowly.
about it. Merry Christmas as well. How was your Christmas this
Merry
year?
Christmas. Yeah, it was okay. It's quiet. It's
Yeah.
quite one, but yeah, we're still soldiering through. Still got New Year's to go.
Good. Any plans for New Year's this year?
Yeah, quiet one in front of the TV. What about you?
Yeah, same. Watching TV all day, I think, today.
Pretty much.
Do you normally go out for New Year's?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, I'm not the type of person that would probably go out and go clubbing or something like that. But I mean, hanging out with friends and stuff like that. That's what New Year's is all about.
Nice.
And really celebrating the New Year. So it's going to be a bit different from last year. I think last year we had good few amount of people at a friend's house, and this year I think it's just going to be about two of us. So
Fair
it's going to
enough.
be an interesting one. What about you? Are you going to have quiet one? Are you
Yeah,
going to
you know
stay in
what?
then?
We got no choice now, so it's gonna be a nice chilled one. You
Yeah,
could probably read a book or something. That'll be it.
exactly.
My old man mode. That'll be it. But yeah, but you know what? You know what? You've done a lot. You've done so much in your life already within music. How did it all start for you? 'Cause I know you've been working since the age of 15. How did it all start for you?
Yeah,
How did you
that
get
was a
into
weird
it?
one. Uh, Gosh, it was just such fluke. Like everything was just it feels like it. There's a moment in your life where you kind of like take a step back and you go, wow, okay, that's why all those things happened or
Hmm.
whatever. All those things at the time, they all kind of align, and you're like, oh right, that's where I kind of ended up. So yeah, back when I was 15, I was really into music, generally speaking. And yeah, I managed to get some work experience at Psycho Sony, and that was like a massive eye opener to me, because it was like, I think it was at the time when Leona Lewis had broken America, and Psycho Sony, a team of, I think it was like 12 or 16 people, like it wasn't above 20, and it was definitely below, sorry, it was definitely above 10. And Psycho Sony, they had brought in 60% of Sony's total revenue, Sony
Wow.
Music at the time. So like, I mean, I was 15, so
Yeah.
you got to like kind of take it back a bit. So you're suddenly thrown into a world where you're working that Simon Cowell's lot, right? So
Mm.
you're like, whoa, okay, cool. This is really cool. And obviously, as a 15-year-old, all you think is like, this is really cool. Like,
Yeah.
no, but you don't actually understand the gravitas of like everything that's going on. They weren't on High Street Ken at the time. They were over in Putney, had their offices there, and Leon Jackson had just won. um uh it's actually a funny story, actually. Maybe we should go into it a little bit, but
Oh, please.
Leon, Leon Jackson had just won X Factor, but I had no idea, because I just, by 15 I was like, I'm not watching X Factor, don't be so
Yeah.
silly or whatever, all these kind of things. Didn't know this was obviously going to happen. And I went in and I was basically starting out by doing like Simon Cowell's fan mail, essentially, kind of going through that, which was a weird experience in itself, because I didn't understand anything in terms of the music industry, and just even those processes are small, but they're quite significant, and how you kind of like manage at scale. And then Leon Jackson came in, but I had no idea who he was, because I hadn't been
Yeah.
watching. So I like he walks in, and he's like, oh yeah, do you want to go grab some lunch and everything like that? Poor guy didn't obviously know that I was 15,
Yeah.
and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, kind of don't know who the hell you are or whatever. Just starts chatting to me. My job was basically to sit on a sofa all day, watch music videos in their kind of like lobby area, because they didn't have a desk for me, because it was just work experience, and just like sort out like all the fan mail. And so he sat next to me, and we just had a bit of a chat, and then I just remember going. I went to lunch, and I think he was in a meeting or something like that. Didn't kind of wait around, and then managed to kind of spot him. He basically came over the bridge and sat down with me, and he goes, yeah. So what are you up to and everything? And I was like, oh, well, doing this work experience. I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry, but I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so it's always awkward, because like the guy, like, I mean, you got to put yourself in his position. I think he was like 19 at the time, and he like literally just shot to fame, like had no concept of what else was going on, and obviously was expecting like that everybody knows his name, because it's one of the most popular TV programs ever. And yeah, we just had a really weird chat about, oh, well, this is, what it was like, before and after, and some of the stuff that he was getting. It was a really deep conversation for like a good hour, but
Mm.
like it was kind of like one of those passing moments where you're just like, I mean, I went back to school after that. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, after my work experience, everyone was like, apparently, like, you've been hanging out with Simon Cowell and like Leon Jackson. And I was like, yeah, I don't know who Leon Jackson is still. Like, I'm still like kind of like just a bit mystified. To me, he was just a person. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And Simon Cowell, yeah, Simon came in a couple of days and everything like that. So, but you know what? Honestly, the biggest thing from that whole experience was that it triggered something in me, that I was like, okay, I want to do something. I want to do this. And there was a lot of people there. His number two, Sonny, at Syco. I don't know whether he stepped down. I think he stepped down now. But he's got an incredible ear for scouting talent. He spends a lot of time. I remember there was a guy called Ridian at the time. I don't know whether you remember
Hmm.
him.
I
He was
remember.
like the runner up, and I remember he had his album on like full blast on repeat in his office, and like I could hear it, and everyone could hear it. But it was because he was trying to kind of get used to some of the songs, I think, and train his ear a bit more, because of like what would be good. I don't know. I'm just only assuming what was kind of going on there, but I just remember it was just like on repeat. Listening to that and seeing how they can kind of like market them, and there it also opened up a kind of like, we were dealing with Cheryl Cole at the time as well, so I had to take out like loads of the newspaper snippets, and just so that she was about to they were going to take her over to America. I didn't know this at the time. I was just told to do a task. Now in context I can see what it is. But all of these small things, like they train you in like a way in which you don't really realize at the time, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, right, well, that's the reason why you do that, and you build this, and you put this team in here, and that's why. And it's such a small thing at the age of 15, but it triggered everything for me, to really kind of, this first time I've spoken about that, I think, in public, or at depth, actually. So yeah, I hope that's useful for somebody.
Oh, definitely. I've learned a lot already. I mean, how long were you there for? Like you said, it was work experience. Were you there for, say, a week or two, or how long was
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
literally like a week.
I
Like
was
it
there.
was,
Okay.
it was literally there and went. But I mean, it was like the biggest eye opener for a 15-year-old. I think, like, you know, you see like these things from the outside, like, oh, okay, cool, the X Factor and whatever. But when you're in the middle of it, and then you're like, oh, it's actually not. It's like demystifies everything that it's possible.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that I see in artists, generally speaking, like a lot. I mean, if we talk about some of the stuff that we're doing over at HyperTribe at the moment, you know, we're doing the Pioneer Mentoring Program, which is helping create diversity in the music industry. And one of those things is that we have a lot of artists, female artists, that kind of they come into they come into the music industry, and there's only about 20% of artists that are signed to major record labels are female. It's something that we want to rebalance, because we're obviously missing a lot of good talent. If you think about, you know,
Of
there's probably
course.
about 30% out there that we're actually not touching on. So one of those things is confidence, and just seeing that you can do it. When we pair these like established artists that will mentor these up and coming artists together, what we see is that the biggest comment that we get is like, it's actually not like magic, you know. It's like, okay, you do a few steps and it gives them hope.
Hmm.
And so it's about kind of like revealing some of that mystery, I think, is one of the most important things that people can do.
That's brilliant. I mean, when did it all start for you, Hyperdrive? When was that moment that you wanted to start something to really help out people?
Um, I think I always tried to start businesses around like helping in music and stuff.
Yeah.
So I had an events company. I started doing events at university in Leeds, and Leeds is a great breeding ground for people who want to be in music, to learn, because it's small enough. It's not like London. It's small enough, but so kind of if you mess up, it's kind of more forgiving. Let's put it that way. Or if you know,
Yeah,
it's also like it's also vibrant enough so you can actually do something, you know. So there's kind of like Leeds is a great place, and there's so much talent that comes out of Leeds. It's unbelievable. And once I, you know, started packing out shows with some of the local bands and stuff, and then we moved it all down to London. And then when we moved it down to London, with the promoter down here, they said, you know, we can see that obviously you guys are doing something good. um, that kind of just started to build. But events aren't necessarily scalable, and that was something for me that I really wanted to kind of get to grips with. I was like, this just isn't scalable, like, you know, in terms of the cost and the money and the time, like, though, it just wasn't equating like at all. So I was like, cool, how can I do this, like help more people in terms of showcases and stuff at scale? And that's when I actually got an offer for investment for from one of the guys. He used to run Metropolis Studio. He used to own Metropolis Studio. Sorry.
wow. I used to work there as
Um,
well.
yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
But yeah. So he has. You know, he's got capital anyway. I mean, he doesn't just own Metropolis. He owns a couple of things. But he kind of said to me, uh, you know, I was looking at basically sounds a bit stupid, but like it was like an underground X Factor, and came into contact with somebody who had quite a good experience in the music industry, generally speaking. So they were interested too. So he put us together to have a good conversation about a few things, and then he said, you know, like, if you can kind of get it to this point, you know, here's the investment. And then I took a look at it for 6 months, and I realized an underground X Factor would go under. I was like, this is going to flop like 100%. So I was like, I'm not going to take your money, I'm just going to keep working on this. So that was probably like 2016.
Mm.
And then from that point, I mean, I was doing management at the time as well, and also I still have a music studio, but you know, the studio was doing fine. And so I sat with this idea and this concept and just started fleshing it out, starting doing competitions, started understanding like, how can we help artists at scale to make money quicker, or this idea of sustainable income. So being able to get people to a place where they can make a living, is really important. Like, we're not talking the 1%, okay? Like, yes, it's great if you can reach that, but let's just get you to like a point where you can actually make a living. Like, I'm kind of sick of the kind of stereotype of the starving musician. I wanted to change that perspective. I just thought that there has to be a way in which we do this. And there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen in the music industry, generally speaking.
Mm.
So bringing all of that together, like it was just like 2016 kickstarted, things like accelerator programs, looking at tech, looking at the tech industry. It's really important that, you take from other industries, you take a look at different models from different industries and bring them into music, because most likely music industry hasn't done it. Like,
No, tell me
it's
about
so behind.
it.
Which is great for me, because I just go, oh yeah, let's take something from the insurance industry. Okay, that works. Like, let's just remodel it. And like, there's business books out there. I'm like, we could literally just change a couple of words and republish this. Like, it just, obviously that we wouldn't do that. But I'm just saying, like, there's so much that applies to the music industry that I think sometimes there is a pretense of like, we're in the music industry, like that kind of like ego that kind of gets in the way, like, but the music industry, and that's why I really hope that I can say, like, I'm not actually in the music industry, I'm kind of on the outside, because I think there's an archaic legacy model that is so anchored in the music industry, and I would quite like to be on the outside of that, because that's where innovation happens.
Definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned innovation there, because that's one of the things we're trying to change and add into this industry. What kind of things are you looking to add in now, apart from what you just apart from what you just mentioned right now? What kind of actually innovation are you trying to bring in?
Well, we can't give everything away.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. But there's quite a lot of, it's just, again, like, one of the biggest things is sustainable income. So taking a look at different types of revenue streams, really taking a look at, one of the biggest things that we have always looked at is building artists as influencers. Like, they are brands in themselves. And I think people forget that. And also building the artist entrepreneur. Okay, so that's one of the biggest things that you'll see throughout HyperTribe. Is like, we build the artist entrepreneur. So we're talking about someone who can make music, and that can be your platform. But also, how do you monetize that as a business? Like, how do you really look into, if you are a brand, like, how do you, as an artist, you are a brand naturally. You have an audience. How do you keep going with that? How do you keep expanding on that? One of those things could be merch. One of those things could be, we've got artists that we're working with at the moment that want to start record labels, and we have the know-how, and also artists who have already done that as mentors to be able to talk about that. It could really be so many different things. There's so many people that come to me and, like, spirituality is a really big part of my music, and I'm like, okay, great, well, how do we monetize that? How do we make that a business for you, as like either a side hustle or something else that you're doing as well? But it all should be succinct under one particular brand.
Definitely, because you've mentioned that you've come across a lot of horror stories through your time as a promoter, studio owner, label owner. What are some of the stand-up stories that stand out to you that you come across over the years? Those must be millions, but
Yeah, it's not so much. I'm happy to always tell them, but like, I'm conscious that I don't want any names, and also I think this is quite a well-known story, so I'm worried that people out there might kind of be like, I know that person.
yeah.
So let me try and shroud it in, like, as much mystery as possible. But let's just say there's a lot of people who have signed, like, the wrong contracts, and you have an international release by an international singer, and you sign the wrong contract, and you end up with no money. So you've got like millions that could potentially be at your disposal, but because you were young and you were desperate, and you didn't read the contract, or your best friend talked you into signing the contract, and then suddenly an international superstar releases it as an international single. Single means, like, obviously, that instead of an album, like, you are actually, that single in particular is going to be releasing, like, being pushed as promo, right? So it's going to have 10 times more like effort put into it than the rest of the album. So they missed out for, I don't know, I haven't really seen a lot, like, for the last couple of months or whatever, but I know that they got the recognition at least. But you can definitely go into stories like, signing the wrong contract, getting duped by something like that, people signing with the wrong managers, and being held in a contract. Once you're publishing, is signed over and you have signed a particular contract with a particular publisher, and say it's such a bad deal, that means that you are like kind of held ransom to fulfilling that contract because you have signed it. So getting out of that is really difficult. And I've seen people that have signed with labels, and they've been shelved, meaning like they sign people labels sign a contract, and they will do that so they can shotgun you, almost like kind of say like, I've reserved this person, and then they'll just shelf them just in case anything comes out of them. I'm not saying like, and I'm really conscious of the rhetoric that people say like labels are the bad people in the music industry. I'm not of that. Like I don't think, I think labels do have a place, but where that is getting a bit more skewed. But I do think that there are horror stories like that, and there's also horror stories of just spending too much money. Like I have heard, like even just like last month, like someone who spent a lot of money on promo, PR, Instagram, whatever else, and all these other things, but especially PR, and they have not had the right returns. Splits with like producers, nightmare, absolute nightmare. Sometimes people want to hold back songs. I've been in situations personally where the guy in the next door studio to me actually was working with some of the artists that I was working with, and we constantly were trying to get the splits out of them. And I did not know that there was something going on between the producer and one of the artists. They obviously got into a fight, and he ended up basically holding back the songs. And absolute 6 months of work just went down the drain.
That's mad, because when you hear about stories like Taylor Swift with Scooter Braun as well, I think did he own her masters or something like that?
Well, to be fair, he did do everything in the right way. Like
Yeah.
he didn't do anything wrong.
No.
It's just that she wants them back, and she's got
Yeah.
enough of an army to basically call it in. So to be fair, he didn't actually. And you do hear things like that. Even there's some stuff going on with Chance the Rapper and his manager, and like technically speaking, from what it looks like, I mean, I'm not in that situation, so I mean, I may be wrong, but the manager didn't do anything wrong. Like there was a contract, it was fulfilled, and that's what it is. But that's where it kind of gets down to like, were you morally right or were you legally right? And that's where the discrepancy comes down to. And I think, you know, Taylor Swift can't own her masters, and for anyone who doesn't understand what that means, it means that you have one specific copy. Your masters is the well, back in the day it used to be like the main record basically that could be pressed and distributed and sold, etc. You know, it's almost like having, like, let's just say like an SD card or whatever, like a, you know, like
SD card.
yeah, so let's just say it's an SD card, because it's easy to think of it in simple terms. But you then have the right to basically reproduce that as much as you want. She basically doesn't have ownership of that, and a lot of people sign away their masters right at the beginning of their career because, you know, that's what publishing asks for. I personally think that model should change, but what it should change into is probably a different conversation. And I think Scooter Braun is obviously like, you know, he's a smart guy. He's obviously a smart guy. He's gone in, he's bought something that he knows is going to make money, and he's been able to, like, you know, take that. I mean, Bob Dylan just sold his for 300 million, you know.
Wow.
Like you can do stuff like that. You can, like, and it's just a shame that obviously she has obviously signed that away at such a young age.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's mad, isn't it? Because that's what people don't always understand, is the business behind it, about these contracts and what you sign away. And I still remember the story about TLC years ago where they literally smashed it with their albums, won a million in Grammys, but they were broke. And people were going, why are you broke though? And they didn't want to give too much away, but they knew that it was contracts and the rest of it that kind of held all their money back. It's just, you got to be so careful, haven't you, with the industry.
Yeah, it's very complex, and there are so many rights and things like that. I mean, one of my big passions is actually law, and not in just in music. Like I'm actually trained in international law, and I find that really fascinating. So all these complexities, it's just kind of like a weird like the boringest game that you could ever imagine for me. Like basically just kind of going through like, okay, cool. So how does okay, right, that okay, so I can understand that situation. So I find that fun. People don't. Like, okay,
Mm.
so there's a lot of people, there's probably a majority of normal people, rather than me, that actually don't find that enjoyable, or actually, it's boring. I mean, I've genuinely had people say to me like, I just can't be bothered with that because that's just so boring. And I'm like, great, cool. Well,
That's me
you're
then.
about to throw, yeah, you're just about to throw all your money away. Okay, cool. Well, that's your whole legacy. Cool, don't worry about it. But there's only so much advice you can always give as well.
I mean, how do you feel then when people say, I can't be bothered for that? 'Cause that's literally all your work going then if you don't take care of your work. I mean, how do you feel when people say that to you? Like, I don't care about that. I can't be bothered.
I think I learned a long time ago through management that you can only push someone so far. I mean, I honestly can say, I feel like there was one person in particular that they have written some of the best songs that will never be heard. Like, honestly, like you can take any pop star out there. I just thought that they definitely rivaled them, any day of the week. Most phenomenal writer, performer, everything else. Um, but I think motivation was lacking. And I learned from that whole experience quite young that you can only push someone so far.
Hmm.
And if either the manager or anyone else around you is doing more work than you, something's wrong.
Mm.
Something's really wrong. And for all those managers out there, that's just a bit of advice. Like, if you're doing more work than your client, something is really wrong. You've got an 80-20 split, which represents the amount of energy and effort and time that is supposed to go into all of those. 80% is them, 20% is you. So that is a good indicator. And I think it's sad. It's always sad to like see kind of talent that just kind of won't listen.
Hmm.
But everyone always says things like, when you see like really good buskers or something on the street
Yeah.
sometimes, and you're always like, God, I just don't know why they don't make it. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like people say that. Like, my dad says that to me all the time. He's like, I found this guy on YouTube and like he's so good. And I'm like, great, cool. And he's like, I just don't understand why these people don't make it in this world. And I'm like, probably because at some point in their life they didn't listen. But you
Hmm.
also get the opposite end of the spectrum from that. Like, you take all the manufactured pop bands, right? And they over listen. They kind of like with TLC. TLC is a really good example. Like, if you listen to too many people, you kind of don't know which way's
You
up.
exactly lose yourself, don't you?
Yeah, you lose that sense of gut feeling, which I think is so important as well.
Yeah. It's so true about getting that sort of balancing act, isn't it? Like remaining true to yourself, yet listening to the right advice to get further in your careers. I mean, how when you work with people, how do you give them say a certain time length to work with? Say I give you say 6 months to a year, for instance, and if I don't see you putting in that work for that period, then we're not gonna carry on working together.
Um, no, I mean, well, HyperTribe is different. Management, there's a reason why I stopped management. I literally walked into the studio one day and I was like, right, everybody out. Everybody is going. Like, I'm done with this. I'm not doing this anymore because it's not for me. It's for some people, it's not for me at all. But that's why I was like, I still want to be able to help artists. I feel like I have a lot to give, but more than that, I feel like we have technology out there that we can implement that can fast track this whole development process, and that is where HyperTribe sits. Like, we sit in that artist development process to help it be refined.
Hmm.
We help artists cut their costs so that they don't waste money, they don't waste time, and they also we're trying to take a look at at the development period of 12 months for them to be able to monetize and get to a sustainable income in 12 months. So we want to that's our aim, that's our goal, and we're looking at different processes and different revenue streams to be able to generate that for anybody
Mm.
across the music industry. So how do you get to that sustainable income? But for artists that we that, let's say, I don't know, if you're talking to me as a manager, like back in the day, like from that perspective, it might be a bit different. So uh, if I mean, I've definitely held on to people for way too long. If there was like an effort or an energy that was lacking, you can always tell. Like from the get-go, you
Mm-hmm.
can always tell. And it's almost like, you know, when you get into a relationship and you're like, oh, this person will change or something like that. They don't. Like they
Yeah.
really don't. And like same thing with for management. Like if you think, and I remember sitting down with the head of the MMF at the time, she was Diane Wag. She was awesome. She is like phenomenal at everything that she does. But I think she stepped down now and stuff like that. But I remember she was the first female like that I had properly had a conversation or had like some sort of basic mentoring from. Just because a friend of mine put me in touch and just said, look, I think you should just get some advice from her. And I was like, okay, good idea. Sat down, had coffee, and I told her all these horror stories about, you know, I'm just putting so much effort. Like I was going into labels and like the A&Rs, I swear on my life, they were crying because they were
Really?
like, they'd hear the song and they'd be like, oh my god. I remember this A&R one. He just went like, just reminds me of like, you know, when I was like young at my grandma's house, and
Yeah.
I was like, I knew this guy was good, but like we had it on full blast, and like it is such like this guy just writes incredible songs. Anyway, and I had promoters waiting to work with him up and down the country, but and they were like, who is this guy? And I was like, I'm not telling you.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm not telling
Good.
you yet until I could see that he was really gonna like absolutely slam it, like
Mm-hmm.
absolutely be all and end all. And then girlfriends came in and all these other things happened and stuff like that. And then by that time I was like, you're never going to change. Like this is not going to change. It's not going to happen. Like I can't tarnish my reputation. Like, you know, this is just not going to happen.
Mm.
So that's when I walked away. And I think that went on a bit too long. So I would say if you think that someone's not putting in the energy and the effort, don't work with them, because if they're acting like that at this level, imagine what they're going to do at like this level, right?
Definitely. Have you learned to trust your gut instincts from now as well? Saying, okay, I'm not going to work with such and such from the get-go.
Yeah, I think you can always tell as well. Um, One of my other kind of roles in terms of consultancy throughout the years. I mean, this is actually very separate. Everything that I'm talking about is very separate to HyperTribe. HyperTribe works on a very straightforward basis. Like we have a monthly fee. So we don't take any commission. We literally work on a monthly fee, a very low, I think it's $27.99 a month. And we consult with you. And also you get like a ridiculous amount of resources, which is what I wanted to do, is like provide high value for like a low cost price. And so in terms of what you want to do with your career, it's completely in your ballpark. Like, you know, I recently wrote out a really nice, like kind of like brand development strategy for one of the artists. And they were like, actually, you know what? I kind of feel like there's like pages 1 and 2 is really appropriate to me, but like 3 and 4, like I don't really want to do. And I'm like, that's completely cool. Like we're just here for advice. So let's just separate those two things. But in terms of, sorry, what was the question?
That's that trusting your gut instinct about different people.
Gut.
Yeah.
Yeah, gut instinct. I mean, I think for now, like, because with HyperTribe, we have a really good team. Like, you know, there's people from all types of backgrounds, like, meaning one guy, all different ages as well. One of the guys that I kind of bounce most of my ideas off, and one of the women as well. He has been in business. He's built 3 multi-million pound businesses. Well, 4, one of which wasn't too successful, but the other 3 were. And he's phenomenal with like business, like, you know, incredible. So although he doesn't come from music, he still keeps me in check. And then also same thing with in terms of marketing, the woman who's on there, she's phenomenal as well. And she manages to, you know, sort out a lot of in terms of marketing. Her experience is just completely is awesome. It's worked for Nike and all these other crazy things and
Wow.
everything. So we have a really good team, and that has taken a really long time to get to as well. But then when it came to gut instinct with particular artists, when I was a manager, um, uh, for sure I held on to things for too long, and now I know that when that gut instinct kicks in, there are times when you're like, this just isn't fitting right. This really isn't. And so you really want to kind of take a breath. And for anybody out there who really does struggle with, like, you know, there's a crossroads and like you've got to take either path A or B, right? Sit with yourself, And the general rule is, if in doubt, do nothing. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
in doubt, do nothing, because the kind of the answer will become apparent. It will become very, very apparent. And so honestly, over Christmas, like, I've kind of had that with a couple of things, because now's the time we rehash some of the strategy for the whole business. And I'm like, gosh, what do we do about this? Or, there's even some of the stuff with the studio as well. I was like, gosh, what do we do about this? Okay, so A or B, and it's kind of been stressing me out a bit. But I mean, and give it a few days, and suddenly you're like, okay, that is definitely the answer. And I'm also quite a spiritual person, with like, kind of, being grateful for everything. I think that's really important. Practicing gratitude, and also just sitting and being still is really, really important, so that you can hear that kind of like inner voice, where you can just say, okay, cool, right, that's what I want to go with. But that all just quickly, that all just comes with a warning.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that
That's
you can
okay.
actually end up in a situation where you make the wrong decision.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time, makes me laugh now. There was a time recently in HyperTribe where we were offered like a really good PR campaign, and they were like, we want 10 grand for the next 4 months. And we had to sit there and like be like, oh, is this how we'd spend our money? Like, is this really how we do it? And I just sat for a while and like just really kind of was just like, no, we can do this better. Like, we can just do this for cheaper, for better, and all these other ways. That's another option as well. So always sit and think, like, if you have like options A and B, it's like, actually, take a third eye perspective and go, can I do this any other way? And
Mm-hmm.
then that should give you your answer.
Definitely. And you mentioned people like Diane White earlier, and the people you work with who run sort of several different multi-million pound businesses. Do you go to these people to get advice for things when you get to that you're on crossroads in life?
They work in our team. So, I mean, we meet every single week minimum. I actually meet with those two in particular twice a week, because we're doing everything online at the moment. But it doesn't take much for us to, like, we don't all sit in a room like every day. Ideally, that I mean, obviously I would like that. One of them's in South Africa, one of them's kind of like the other end of the UK. So they would probably laugh at that, being like, yeah, of course Kimmy would like that, just for like us to all just like sit like constantly, be like, right, what are we gonna do today? But life doesn't work that way. Life really doesn't work that way. So you really have to kind of take it. I definitely take advice. One of the biggest things, like, I have to say, I learned from my family, actually, watching 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 a parent of mine kind of do it, the kind of, it's my way or the highway. And I sometimes see those kind of people, and I'm like, that's just not how you build business. Like, I get that maybe it works for someone somewhere along the line, but I mean, it just doesn't. That's just not how it works. It's all collaborative. Like, you've got to be able to be empathetic, family first every
Hmm.
single time. If anyone's got any family problems, like, I don't care what's going on with HyperTribe or whatever, you have to put family first,
Definitely. I
and then
couldn't agree
everything else
more.
falls in.
Definitely. And with your podcast plugged into, do you feel like that's a kind of extension of what you do with HyperTribe in order to give advice to people and those sort of things as well?
Yeah, I think it's an accessible way in which people can actually have a conversation, and like, either with themselves, or kind of hear from experts as well. There's a lot of people that we interview, and that also, we're seeing a lot of questions come up with some of our members, and we're like, okay, cool, well, let's try and get an expert in and answer those questions, because our members might not be the only people that are asking those questions. It might be that there's about 100 other people out there that might need that fulfilled. So people can log in and listen to that. But more than that, that kind of insider series where it was just me, that was about, really, there was one particular episode that I really wanted to expose, which is the darker side of the music industry, and nobody really talks about stuff like that. So I wanted to kind of give a more balanced perspective of just like, you might not be able to do this, like, but what you can do, you don't necessarily have to be super famous, but you can at least get to a point where, you know, you're making a sustainable income, and, you know, these are the problems that you might face, but just so you know, you're not the only one. Like, there
Mm.
are other people out there. And also, building an artist's career is very similar to building a business. So anything that a lot of our members are going through, I've either been through or I am going through as well. Um, and so all of us, in terms of like the team, in terms of observing what is going on with our members, is really, really important. Really
Definitely.
important.
And how you been finding it so far doing the podcast? Do you really enjoy it as well?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been an interesting one. I mean, I was so scared. I was so scared. And it was like really ironic. We actually started it before lockdown. Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Before lockdown happened. And what I found was that as soon as lockdown happened, I don't know whether you found this as well, but I feel like everyone just started a
Yeah, everyone.
podcast.
Literally
And
everyone
I
started
was just
doing
like,
one.
and I was like, oh no, we look like those. Like, we look like everyone's just started one and we just hopped on the bandwagon. But we actually, although we started it in March, we were actually planning to put out a regular piece of content, because we were starting our brand in March. I mean, we've done a lot in a year, and I'm really proud of everything that we've done. Like, we've been able to, I think we've got a community. We have about 5,000 artists now, and then in our community, in our wider community, then we have about 500 kind of members on our portal, and a good handful of those we work with one to one, and that kind of uh, building just that in 9 months
Hmm.
was just a lot for us, and working with some of the people that we had done. But the podcast was a really nice way. Especially, I like the insider stuff because I like to be able to kind of share that experience and just say, like, hey, you're not the only one, I'm going through this one too.
Mm. That's another big reason why I started my podcast as well, and not just for the bandwagon stuff. Because I thought that before this whole man, but I mean,
We'll
obviously,
see who lasts, you know, like, meaning, like, I think the people who started in lockdown, as soon as lockdown lifts, they'll be like, I'm
yeah,
out.
forget it now. 'Cause apparently, the limit for most people is 7 episodes, and people give up after that. Apparently,
7.
apparently, I know you've done 36, haven't
Wow.
you?
Yeah.
And yeah, but thank you for having me on your podcast. I absolutely loved it though. People are listening to that.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, yeah,
um,
for sure.
definitely. What was I gonna say? Yeah, like I've realized as well that for people who are not in the music industry, they think that what we do is really easy, don't they? They think, oh, you must be performing all over the place. You must get loads of money, not knowing the bullshit that we got to go through to get to where we go. And people think it's so easy that you should try this, you should do that. You got to work harder. You got to work harder, not knowing exactly what we do to get there. And that's why another reason why I started the podcast was to share these behind the scenes stories, saying we absolutely work our arse off to get here. And just because you're not posting on social media every 5 minutes doesn't mean we're not working. Do you get that as well? That people will come up to you say, "Oh, you should try this. You should do that," not knowing exactly what you do.
Um, we've been through a series of like competitions, and like those competitions were in some really good places, like really good places. And
Mm.
so what I get is like, I mean, this is contradictory to a lot of the stuff I've probably just said, but I got a lot of industry experts that were like, oh, this is what you should do with this, or this model won't scale, or this won't happen. And they're talking about the business. And I'm sat there just going like, well, I heard the exact opposite from someone just like you last
Mhm.
week. And so I'm like, well, which piece of advice do I really take is kind of what it comes down to. And I think that was actually one of the biggest things that I struggled with a couple of years ago, was like, whose advice do you take? Like, whose advice do you really take? And I think you are influenced by other people's
Of
advice,
course.
okay, but you always go on your own gut feeling.
Yeah,
And
I was
that
gonna
gut
ask that.
feeling comes from different types of things that happen, body language to, like, I don't know, I'm quite a spiritual person, so I feel like that there's some sort of like fate that everybody's kind of like destined to, that I'm like, okay, cool, well, you're always going to be led down the right path eventually. So there's that side. And I think in when you're formulating a concept or an idea, and the same goes for artists, like every artist starts in a niche, right?
Hmm.
Which is the same thing with business. Every business starts in a niche, unless you are mass marketing, and mass marketing takes a ton of money. So if you're going straight to pop, or if as a business, let's just say you're going straight for, like, I don't know, you want to sell toilet roll and you want to be the number one brand in toilet roll, okay, there's a huge market already out there. So you're going to have to basically spend a lot of money on marketing to be able to get your product seen and heard and be the number one brand. Okay. So you're competing with different things unless you started in a niche. So let's just say, now we're on toilet roll. I can't believe I'm talking about this.
Music to
And like,
toilet
let's just
roll.
go for like toilet roll that has aloe vera or like something like that, or like it's like environmentally friendly or biodegradable. Then your market is smaller, and then you can probably dominate that. Now, like, that's what you've got to figure out first, and then the advice should slot into that. I've had lawyers that have been in the music industry for years tell me music has to be on your platform. I've had like editors of massive magazines come and sit with me, just like, um, one of the competitions we did was called Founders Forum Day, and it's run by Founders of the Future, or Founders Forum. Founders Forum is a massive accelerator, one of the best in the world, and they are extremely well connected, and they create multi-million pound businesses quite quickly through their accelerator. And their Founders Forum Day is like, let me just put this in context, like Prince William was there, and then David Cameron. Every single person that you meet is just phenomenal. Like,
Mm.
it's like you just start talking to someone and they've just built like the next, like, I don't know, Uber or something like that, or like you talk to another person and they're like the CEO of, WME, the agency. Like, it was literally like that all day, and it was the
Wow.
most crazy day of my life. But there's five founders of the future, so like the younger generation, they get to pitch to this whole room. And so I ended up, I was one of those five people, and it was a national competition. So we got down to the finals, didn't win, but I mean,
That's still
whatever.
amazing, though. Congratulations.
Yeah, it was 2017, but that was when, like, you start to really realize, like, I was the only female in that kind of like five, and then you get everybody else coming up afterwards, being, because there's this massive party, and like, I'm telling you, it's like the best party you've ever been to. Everybody is like so drunk. It's a pool party, and like, you like literally like the most amazing people. Not one person is just kind of like mediocre. Like, you just kind
Yeah.
of like, they're incredible people, and it's like all these lights, everything's just crazy. Like, just like in Hatfield, like, or somewhere, I can't remember where it was, like outside of London, like slightly on the outskirts. And I just like, it was a nuts day. But then you just have people coming up to you just being like, yeah, I didn't really get this, or like, I didn't really get that, or what you should do is, and because they are so phenomenal, you just want to be like, yeah, that's such a good idea, and you
Yeah.
write it down, and then you're like, wait, no, like, this wasn't my vision. And the difference is like, if you are in the industry, that's why I'm saying that I kind of want to be on the outside, because if you're in the industry, you're going to tell me stuff to build in the industry. And I'm like, but that's when innovation doesn't happen, because you're just working on the same legacy crap that
Hmm.
that kind of got us into this space. So what we really need to do is actually take a look and say, wait, but what if I told you it was from this perspective? Which is why I think, that kind of tech and that music kind of plugged together. It's just about, right, what makes business sense, what really makes business sense, and trust that gut instinct.
Definitely. And that's the perfect way to end the podcast, actually. I love a great positive message like that. So thank you. And keep up that amazing work, because what you do is absolutely incredible. So keep it up.
Yeah, and likewise as
Uh,
well. Thanks so much for having me on.
it's my pleasure. Thank you as well. And before we go, how can people find you online as well?
Head over to HyperTribe, www.hypertribe.io, and we're online. We got our Instagram at hyper_tribe. um I don't normally promote my own socials, to be honest, but
Okay.
but you can follow the business, because I'm quite a private person anyway. But
Fair enough. Fair enough. But again, thank you, Kimmy, so much for an amazing episode.
no
Thank you.
worries.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.